Hi guys, a little bit of a different topic today, but still on the subject of wristwatches. So, wristwatches are machines, and like all machines, they can go wrong. And I have had experience when they've done just that. And I think people kind of get this perception, and I'll say, automotive industry, same kind of thing. People have brand biases, and they tend to think that things have a certain level of engineering that they must never go wrong. So I know a lot of people in the car world, if it's Japanese cars or German cars or American cars or what have you, there are people that are diehard believers that a certain brand or a certain model, never has issues and it's bulletproof. And the same goes for the watch world. There are people that think that Rolexes or Breitlings or Tag Heuers or Seikos or you name it, that they believe that they're perfect and they never have quality issues and they never go wrong. But as we all know, that isn't the case. Murphy's Law says that what can go wrong will go wrong eventually, and wristwatches are no exception to that rule. And part of the reason I'm making this video is just I don't want people to be surprised if they buy a high-end wristwatch if they have issues with it. And I don't say that as in anticipate having issues with it, but I don't want people to think that because they're spending a significant amount of money on something, or they bought a certain name brand wristwatch, for example, that they should expect it to work flawlessly for the rest of their lives. At the very least, these things, again, being mechanical machines, require service. They have lubrication in them, and the lubrication will dry up over time. They have seals, which if they're not replaced can let water into them. They need to be regulated. They can get magnetized. There's all sorts of reasons why they could have issues with their timekeeping over time. But the other thing that comes up is, a lot of these things, again, are handmade, and even the ones built on assembly lines aren't impervious to this. So, for the sake of this video, let's exclude things that aren't maintained properly. So, maintenance aside, if you don't take care of your watch, if you don't replace the seals, if you don't have it serviced, every 5 or 10 years to make sure that the lubrication is still good, that stuff you're asking for trouble. And we don't really need to talk about that because, it's like not changing the oil in your car and expecting your car to run perfectly forever. If you don't change the oil in your car, eventually your car is going to have lubrication issues and you can end up seizing your motor. So it's kind of, again, it's expected that these things require maintenance. And again, wristwatches are no different. However, sometimes they just have quality issues, and it's not that they weren't maintained properly, it's that they weren't assembled properly in the factory, or there could be a design flaw with the way they're engineered, what have you, and things happen. And unfortunately, I've had some very nice watches that have had issues. And, in the background of this video, I'm going to try to play a little bit of a clip of my Rolex Daytona. Now, if you guys have been following my channel, you've probably seen my video review of my Rolex Daytona. If you haven't, you can feel free to check it out. You can see a full review of that watch. So the Rolex Daytona is a chronograph, and as it's a chronograph, it has multiple complications on top of timekeeping. And the more complications you have, the more complicated the movement, the more chances there are for things to go wrong, because you have to have a lot of things in synchronicity for it to function properly. And unfortunately, my Rolex Daytona, for the first 6 months or so that I had it, it had all sorts of issues. And basically what it boiled down to is the chronograph wouldn't function the way it was supposed to. You would get a situation where you would start the chronograph and you would get the counters going, and the counter would keep track, the 30-minute counter would keep track for, I don't know, maybe the first 2 or 3 minutes, and then the clutch that actually ran the counter would start slipping. And basically, it just wouldn't keep track of time appropriately. There was something wrong with the mechanism that was allowing the counter to slip and not keep accurate time. And, I had to send it back to the jeweler. They took it apart, they put it back together, and then within a couple weeks of them giving the watch back to me, I had the same issue. And, some of this I can blame on the people that serviced the watch. I bought the watch certified pre-owned, so who knows who was working on it and what they did with it. But, again, I had this watch, the first 6 months I had this watch, it didn't work right. And fortunately for me, the second time I got it fixed, that time it actually fixed it. I'd say the negative thing of that is ever after that I never trusted the watch. And part of the reason that I don't have the watch anymore is there was a part of me that just didn't trust that it was going to hold up well. And granted, that watch could have kept accurate time for 30 years without a problem. Again, this is just, to me, at that point, I just didn't trust it. But that says nothing against Rolex Daytonas in general, I'm sure most people don't have issues with their Daytonas. This just happened to happen to me. Another watch I had an issue with was a Breitling Navitimer Montbrelant that I had. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the older Navitimers, they actually didn't use a Breitling movement in them. They used a modified ETA movement in them. And the one that I had was a modified, I want to say if it was a 7750 or a 2892, I can't remember which one it had in it, to be honest at the point. It was not a 7750. It was a modified base ETA that had an added chronograph module on it. That's what it was. And long story short, the counter for the chronograph was loose, and you would go to reset it, and it wouldn't stay put at the 12 o'clock position. It would slowly slide its way around the dial, and it just wouldn't stay in place. And it wasn't that the hand wasn't affixed to the face correctly. It was that there was some sort of a slippage in the movement, and it just would slowly slide around the face. And I sent it back to get fixed, and it worked fine for another 3 weeks or so, and then sure enough, it started doing the same thing again. And again, as with the Daytona, I got a little uncomfortable with the watch, and after I got it fixed for the second time, I actually traded it in on my Rolex Submariner. So, unfortunately, I had that issue. Another watch you guys have probably seen on my channel is, probably about 5 years ago, I bought my father an Omega Seamaster, and unfortunately, it was a poor decision on my part. I bought him the quartz model. I should have gotten him the automatic, but, I was being cheap at the time. As cheap as I could be buying him an Omega. And unfortunately, that watch has also been a disaster. It works now, and it's worked great for the last 4 years, but the first year we had that watch, it had all sorts of issues. It would just randomly stop ticking. The date wouldn't change appropriately. There was, I kid you not, we probably had the thing into Omega 4 or 5 different times, and every time it came back, it had a different issue on it. And, we decided to keep the watch because my father loved it, which I'm thrilled, despite its issues, and it was under warranty because I bought it new. And I think we kind of thought at that time we'll keep it till the warranty goes out, and then once the warranty goes out, if we don't have any faith in it, we'll get rid of it. But my father decided to keep the watch. It's been years since, and the watch runs great. But again, the first year we had it, it was at Omega being fixed more often than it was on the rest. So, and the examples I've just given you 3 big brands: Omega, Rolex, and Breitling, and every single one of them had an issue. Now, granted, I've had probably 10 or so Rolexes. I've had at least 2 Breitlings beyond the Montbrelant. I'm trying to go back, and I've had tons of Omegas. So, have I had issues with all my Omegas or all my Rolexes or all my Breitlings? No. And is it likely that you're going to go buy a brand new watch and have issues with it? No. But it's possible, and the reason that I'm telling you all this is, again, you have to keep in mind that you're buying a very complex piece of machinery. Maybe not the Omega so much because it's a circuit board with a battery, but that's a whole other story. But, for sure the Breitling and the Rolex, because despite if it's an ETA movement or a Rolex movement, or, it's a new in-house Breitling movement or a Jaeger-LeCoultre movement or a Patek Philippe movement, what have you, these things are machines. They're mechanical in nature. They have all sorts of gears, and they're precisely timed, and they rely on lubrication and all sorts of things to keep them accurate. And as with any machine, they have the possibility to go wrong. So whenever you buy a luxury timepiece, or even if you buy, a $200 Seiko, just keep that in mind and understand that as machines, they're going to have issues possibly, especially if you don't maintain them. You're asking for issues, and just keep that in mind and just understand that that's part of what you're buying into. So, on the other part of this too is, if you have an issue with one watch, that does not mean that all watches from that brand are going to be junk either. For my Daytona and all the issues I had with it, I've had several Rolexes that I loved that I never had an issue with. And actually, my Submariner that I have on this channel that I sold a while ago, that watch kept perfect time, literally perfect time. I had it checked for accuracy, and it wasn't gaining or losing a single second. I mean, it was a beautifully precise watch. And I have my President and my Datejust. I've had a bunch of Rolexes, and again, with the exception of the Daytona, they've all been beautiful. And my other Breitlings never had a problem. My other Omegas never had a problem. So, again, I'm not saying it's going to happen to you, but just be aware that it can happen. And, also understand, if you're going to buy a more expensive watch, that if something does go wrong, that it's not going to be cheap to fix, unfortunately. And that's just something you have to go on. It's like, again, with a car. If you don't if you have an issue with your car, it could be a cheap fix, hopefully, but it could also be an expensive fix, and that's just the nature of the beast. You know, if my Daytona had an issue, it could be, you know, $1,000 plus out of pocket to fix it. And that comes down to the complexity of the movement and the fact that they have to, you know, disassemble the parts. There's like 300 plus pieces, I think, in the movement of my Daytona. And you basically, somebody's sitting there, you know, taking it apart by hand, cleaning all the parts and reassembling the watch. And that's, you know, a laborious task. And then you're going to, of course, pay a premium too because you have a luxury item, and that's just the nature of the beast. So I hope you guys found this informative. Again, I hope this was helpful to you all. Please, as always, comment, rate, and subscribe. And if you have any questions that you'd like for me to answer, if there's something that I think I can speak intelligently to and that people would benefit from, please leave them in the comment section below, and they might end up as a future post. Thank you guys so much.